Thank you for tuning in to Best Friends Dissimilar Interests, a show in which two best friends share all the weird shit that they like with each other. This is Matt.
And this is Tiberi.
And this week, I have kind of thrown you into the deep end. We're talking about Panopticon's Kentucky.
Yeah, black metal, huh?
Yeah, so part of this project for me is building a base of knowledge within you. I feel like I'm like a teacher, and I'm just like, okay, kid, you're gonna learn everything about extreme metal now.
Yeah, well, but I kind of have the same thing with like anime and shit, where I'm just like, you know what ska is now? You want to talk about ska? Can we talk about ska some more? How about this other ska thing? So we'll be experts in ska and black metal at the very least.
Yeah. So I don't really know why. Well, no, I know why I went with this one first. It's because I just was like, what do you want to do? And you picked Harlan County, USA, and I thought that this was kind of a good companion piece with it. So I've definitely...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've definitely kind of thrown you into the deep end, though, as far as, like, metal, and we'll get into that. But,
okay.
Yeah, do you mind if I just dive into kind of the history that led to black metal and what you heard?
So again, for those who haven't listened to the episode from 2 weeks ago, I have never consumed any kind of black metal at all, or really, this is my absolute first exposure to it. We're listening to this album, so I really want you, Matt, to kind of explain everything about this, because I have zero clue as to like how this differs from other types of metal.
Yeah, and I'm definitely going to get into that a little bit, because like I said, I think this is going to be kind of a slow process where I introduce, like, okay, this was black metal, and then, like, maybe it'll be a doom metal album, and I'll tell you about doom metal. But, so I do have a little bit of history about black metal in general, and it can largely be broken down into two waves. So the first wave of black metal was, like, early 80s. And it was some big names that you need to know are like Venom, Bathory, Hellhammer, which they broke up in 84, and two of the guys in Hellhammer went on to form Celtic Frost, which they're also big names in like that first wave. And
that's one of the most badass names I've ever heard. Just to say that.
Yeah, fucking Hellhammer,
Celtic Frost.
Yeah, Celtic Frost.
Oh, that too.
Yeah, Celtic Frost is really good. They because like, and like we'll get into that, but like. They're one of from this first wave, I think they're one of the bands that went on to do some like really cool, interesting stuff.
Okay.
People lump in Merciful Fate with the first wave of black metal. I don't really see it myself. Have you ever heard of Merciful Fate or King Diamond?
Neither.
So King Diamond was the lead singer of Merciful Fate, and he's technically a very impressive singer in that his vocal range is 8 octaves, which I don't know that much about it, but I do know that's like very impressive. But
how the hell?
But in effect, so like the way he uses that is he goes from the highest, shrillest, like falsetto, and then the next second, like the next line will be this deep guttural, like, so it's kind of jarring. And Merciful Fate is kind of just like this like standard metal band with the weirdest fucking vocalist you've ever heard. So I in a way, I kind of see why they're included with that. I think it is partly because of like their image. But a couple other names are like, these are German bands that, especially their later stuff, gets lumped in with thrash metal, which is a Creator and Sodom. And just some stuff that like all these bands have in common is they're really fast, like the music's just really fast. The vocals tend to be like really rough and kind of guttural, and the production quality is just really raw and just not well produced in a way.
Okay, and is that specific to the first wave stuff?
No, so that actually it carries over to the second wave, which we will kind of talk about, because the second wave is where black metal really became a genre. Because these bands early on would have just been called like extreme metal, because people didn't really know what it was, because it was the first of what became extreme metal, which is now, at the time, was just like, okay, it's this weird new genre that is like heavier than heavy metal, so it's called extreme metal. Now that's an umbrella term that encompasses like death metal, black metal, thrash metal, doom metal, and all of their subgenres.
Okay.
So they shared the theme of like they wrote a lot about Satan. Like all of them, their image was
Oh, Jesus.
yeah, their image was very satanic, but it was just kind of for shock value. And they're like, "What's the most metal evil thing? Satan."
Oh,
And
okay. Okay.
it's like very like band to band. It kind of depends. Like Venom, it feels very tongue in cheek. Like it doesn't feel even remotely serious with Venom. And like
Sure.
Merciful Fate, King Diamond is technically a Satanist, but it's like that LaVey Satanism, which I don't know that much about, but like it feels very much
Yeah.
like 60s self-help, but they're like, it's pretty rad, Satan.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So like I said, I don't know that much about it, but I think just kind of, I know it's atheistic, like they don't actually worship a deity or anything. It's just like I said, kind of
It's more so just the imagery and the shock value of it.
I think probably. Yeah, I'd say that that's probably accurate. And like I said, I know it is kind of more philosophical writing of just like, okay, this is what I think would be a good life, and King Diamond was into that. And so that's kind of, I think, part of why they're lumped in is because they used that imagery.
Huh.
And this was kind of the beginning of the Satanic Panic, which I think is part of why they were doing it, is they're like, oh, people are really scared of this shit. And a lot of these bands, like Merciful Fate and Venom, I think, both were included on like that Filthy 15 when they were like, we need to stop these bands. So even though they like weren't big at all at the time, somehow Tipper Gore heard about Merciful Fate and she's like, I gotta fucking stop them. The name black metal actually comes from Venom's second album, and I love how they landed on this. So you know how we both hate Bon Jovi.
Oh my God. Yep. You outed me right up here on the podcast. I hate Bon Jovi.
I also
asterisk. I can jam one or two maybe songs, but the vibe not for me, man. Sorry, John Bon Jovi.
I don't know, man. I kind of hate I hate his music. He kind of seems like a dick, but I don't know him obviously. But like everything about Bon Jovi, I'm just like not excited about. But anyway, so Venom's first album comes out, Welcome to Hell. I'm pretty sure in '81. I don't have any of this in front of me. It's just very fast and aggressive, and kind of the reason it's like that is because they just weren't very technically good musicians. So they're like, okay, we're not going to be able to like shred, but we can just play as fast as we can. And that's kind of where part of that sound comes from, is just the fact that Venom wasn't that good. But anyway, so their first album came out, and it was like this really kind of ahead of its time as far as its sound. There was apparently some body that tracked the best-selling metal albums, like some Billboard kind of a thing. And the top at the time, a Bon Jovi album was listed as the best-selling heavy metal album.
Oh, what?
Yeah, and the dudes in Venom saw this, and they were like, fuck that. If Bon Jovi is heavy metal, we're not heavy metal. We're fucking black metal.
I mean, hey, that's a fair line of dialogue in my eyes.
Yeah, I genuinely love Venom. Even, like I said, they're really not, people will be like, oh, this band sucks. And it's like, they probably don't suck. They're professional musicians. They're probably really talented. Venom kind of just wasn't that good, but they were just ahead of their curve, so people just love them.
That's wild to me.
Yeah, Venom's great. But so that was kind of the first wave. That was early 80s through kind of like mid 80s. A lot of these bands went on to do different kind of sounds. Like they were like, okay, we have that really raw, primal, fast metal. It's really heavy. They went on to do different, interesting things with it, especially like Celtic Frost. They did just like really strange kind of albums that were really good. But
okay.
So that's the first wave. The second wave happens in the early 90s, specifically in Norway, is the sound that we now are like, okay, that is the template of what black metal is. And there were like different scenes, obviously, that had, kind of different sounds, but Norway is the big one. And
okay, so just to clarify, you've always told me about Norwegian black metal. Is that what this is?
Yeah. Well, so what you heard, Panopticon?
No. What you're describing now, that Norwegian movement.
Yeah, so that's the second wave, and yeah, that's Norwegian black metal. That's what,
okay.
like I said, when people say black metal, that's kind of the archetype that they're building off of, is that second wave, really, from Norway.
Okay. Gotcha.
There's, and this is kind of where it gets a little bit harder to talk about black metal, because like there were so many people in that scene that were very hashtag problematic for different reasons, from being like, oh, okay, they said something that's not great, all the way up to they were like basically terrorists.
Oh, Jesus.
So, but for better or for worse, every kind of conversation about the second wave kind of has to start with mayhem. I'm not going to get into like the specifics of like crimes and stuff like that, because I just don't really want to dwell on it. I don't think it's really what we're here for. But
so Mayhem's a band.
Yeah, so Mayhem, they're still a band, but it's really just like one guy who is still alive, that's in the band, and he's like, it's the drummer, and he's like he's a bad dude. He's a piece of shit. So like, yeah. But who I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit was a lead singer that they had, or well, I guess you'd say vocalist, because he didn't really sing. In like the very late 80s and early 90s, it was a dude named, so they all had stage names. And that's like a big thing in black metal, is everybody has a really stupid stage name. And this dude's stage name was just Dead.
Dead? D-E-A-D, Dead.
Dead. And so
just Dead.
Yeah, just Dead. And that's not even like, so that one's actually okay. It's just like, oh, okay, Dead. Some of them are just aggressively stupid. Like I think the funniest one is Count Grishnak.
So they called me in high school.
Yeah, which is, it's like a very stupid, funny name, but also he's just like the worst one. Like he was the one that committed a bunch of crimes and just all kinds of stuff.
Jesus.
But anyway, so I want to talk a little bit about Dead, and partly because, his vocals and everything were a big kind of inspiration as far as kind of how black metal vocals went, but I also just wanted to talk about him for the image, because that is kind of a big thing that he contributed. So,
okay.
And I do have like some images that we're going to look at here in just a minute, but he started, like, everybody kind of agrees that Dead was the first black metal musician to do corpse paint. Have you ever heard of corpse paint?
Not really.
So it's like black and white face paint, that his thing was he wanted to look like a corpse while he was performing. So like he would put on like this face paint, and he would do a lot of other stuff that's like really kind of bizarre. Like he would bury his clothes and let them partially rot, and then he would like dig them up and perform in them on stage, so that like he smelled like decay, and just like a bunch of weird shit.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and like this,
I mean, hey, dedication to the bit, I guess.
And like this is the really mild stuff, if I'm frank and honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, that's not hurting anybody. That's fine.
Yeah, and like unfortunately, he was just a deeply mentally ill man who people now think that he had this really rare condition. I don't remember what it's called, but it's a mental health condition where someone just believes themselves to be dead, and they like feel like they're a corpse. And people think that he had that because of a lot of the ways, not only was it like his stage performance, but like a lot of his behaviors and stuff is it's just really weird. And like I said, he was clearly very mentally ill, and unfortunately did not get the help that he needed.
That's unfortunate, yeah.
So like I kind of just want to touch on that, because he was very important to like the image, and also he seems like he was kind of the one guy from Mayhem that might have been an okay dude. Like he was very, very weird, but he didn't really hurt anybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's at least a bar to go by.
Yeah. So I don't know. I thought it was important to bring up. But I did want to, now that we're kind of talking about that image a little bit, I thought it would be fun to go and look at some album covers, and also some like actual images of black metal musicians that I had sent you. I can put all of this up in the description so people can see it. But let's look at that. Let's get that pulled up real quick.
Hell yeah.
So if you go to like your lyric sheet and go to the bottom, you will start seeing images.
Yes, I have those here.
Okay. So let's see here. So for the kind of 80s / new wave of British heavy metal, which is like early 80s stuff, We
Got it.
have two album covers here. It's Killers by Iron Maiden and Screaming for Vengeance by Judas Priest. So if you could kind of just like tell me the vibe you're getting, kind of what you get off of those album covers.
So the Iron Maiden one, I mean, is the zombie man's name? Is it Eddie? Is that right?
Yeah, Eddie is their mascot. He's been on all of their album covers. But yeah, that's Eddie, their mascot.
Okay, yeah. Eddie's kind of standing there. It looks like he's holding like a, I can't tell, is that like an axe or a gun? And he's standing there holding it, and it's just outside of what looks to be like an urban apartment. It looks goofy. It looks silly. Like, it looks very self-aware, like they intended this to be something silly. Somebody's like pulling on his like shirt or his collar, and it's like it just looks very wacky. The Judas Priest one is this really rad ass like eagle soaring in on this very like just cool colored background, and then like, they have like this really cool word art that says Judas Priest, and it looks cool. Also, great album title, Screaming for Fucking Vengeance.
Oh, yeah, Judas Priest is great, man. I love Judas Priest. But yeah,
That's fun.
so like bright colors, kind of, like the Iron Maiden one's kind of cartoony in a way. And just, like when you think metal, this is kind of what you think of in a way. Or like that's what I think of is this kind of imagery.
Sure.
So beneath that, we have the first wave of black metal. So we have Black Metal by Venom and then Bathory's self-titled album.
Oh yeah, definitely a little spookier. Yeah, okay, interesting.
So yeah, like a lot of the stuff is stripped away. It's just like black and white, or the Bathory one is yellow.
Yeah.
And it's kind of it's almost kind of a rejection of what's going on in metal. They're like, no, we're doing our own thing. We're stripping away a lot of this paint, and we're just doing it, raw and lo-fi.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you go ahead.
No, go on.
Oh no,
Like I definitely see what you're saying when you say like the imagery Venom has, where it's like very like devil centric, very like kind of against the status quo in a way, where it's really more so just kind of like, aha, look at us, we're out here.
Yeah. So, and like I do think that the album covers also speak to the sound, where it is, like I said, very stripped down and very raw, lo-fi, and all that stuff. So I think that it's actually kind of informative in a way. So that's why I wanted to do this.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Oh, you go ahead. Sorry.
No. I mean, it's interesting to see the different eras and movements. How it's just the album art's different like this. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're ready, we can go down to the next, which is thrash metal.
Okay, so we have a Megadeth album here. It says Peace Sells, but who's buying? Is that the title of the album?
It is, yeah.
That's again, this one seems almost Iron Maiden-esque. It's like a skeleton man with like goggles on, holding the for sale sign, and this like this broken dystopian looking background with like military jets flying by. It looks pretty, like I said, goofy for the sake of being goofy. And then Slayer, of course, with Rain and Blood. God almighty. That's a terrifying album cover.
Yeah.
Jesus.
And I kind of picked these two because it kind of shows the diverging paths in thrash metal. So Megadeth is very much like, so that character is Vic Rattlehead, which is their mascot. And
okay.
So it's very much in that kind of older, the imagery is kind of in that like new wave of British heavy metal, but just maybe turned up to 11.
Yeah.
And I do think it's like very funny that the marketability of having a your own character. It's like, this is Eddie, this is Vic Rattlehead, and a lot of thrash metal bands have that. Like that is very common. Slayer does not. Like Slayer was like, okay, what's the scariest fucking thing we can put on an album?
Jesus God, yeah, that is. My goodness, that's pretty intense. But
yeah, it's just like this weird fucked up depiction of hell. They still do have like the goofy logo, which is like it's a Slayer inside the pentagram made of swords, which I've always thought is really funny.
Yeah, that's goofy. It's silly.
But yeah, and so they, became very influential on death metal, and I think you can kind of see that in the album. Like they're kind of going in that
Yeah.
direction. And then below that we have death metal. Speaking of,
And is that so? This band's called Death. Is that where the name death metal came from, or is that just
no,
coincidence?
that's where it came from.
Oh, interesting. So that's really interesting. So I just assumed death metal and black metal were just kind of the vibe. But so Venom coined that term for black metal, and death is the namesake for death metal. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And so Death started as a thrash metal band, and their sound morphed, and they really spearheaded death metal. And obviously there were other bands, like Possessed was also really early, but they were, like you're saying, they're kind of the ones that people were like, oh, okay, that's death metal, that's its own unique thing. And this is one of their kind of later album, or not later, but once they get past that thrash sound, because their
Yeah.
early album covers are very thrash, and the sound is very thrash. But this is Human, so it's a different vibe. If you want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. So it's just two anatomical kind of cross sections showing this human skeletons and organs. And it's just yeah. I mean, it's got some kind of like kind of almost drippy, like kind of watercolor effects in the background, and then it's got the logo that just says "Death" with a scythe for the A, and then a little reaper on the H. Nothing too outlandish, honestly.
One of my favorite things about Death is you can, like, their logo is constantly changing because it started really over the top and goofy, and they slowly just stripped it away until the only goofy thing that remained was the scythe. But they still have the little reaper in this one, so.
Another terrifying one to the right, from Obituary, Cause of Death. Wow, again, scary. Looks like it'd be like a tree made of faces with a person caught in a spider web that's connecting between the tree and a superimposed looks to be a giant goat eye, and then some, like, I don't know, fingers coming out of the ground. Yeah, that's fucked.
My favorite thing about this album cover is every time I see it, I'm like, this just looks like a Castlevania level.
I can see that.
Like
it is very Castlevania, isn't it? Yeah.
You walk into a room and a boss bar appears and it says like "Eye of Malalik," and that's what it is.
Oh God.
So yes, but you can kind of see like it is still very kind of expressive, and it's going for darker, but it's still kind of like pushing in that same direction. And this is why I wanted to do this exercise, because when we look at black metal down below,
okay, yes.
So we have Transylvanian Hunger by Dark Throne, and I can't pronounce this fucking album, but it's Mayhem's first album, De Mysterious Dem. I don't fucking know. But anyway, so tell us about what you see here.
So Transylvanian Hunger has a picture of what looks to be just a person wearing some jewelry and has a candelabra, and they're just screaming.
Yeah, and it's just black and white. It looks like a fucking Xerox that you've done a billion times, so it's really kind of washed out.
Yeah, it does. someone went to Kinko's a little too often.
Yeah. And that's the funniest thing about black metal to me, is it's like, on one hand, kind of the most terrifying thing ever, and then on the other hand, it's just like the nerdiest motherfuckers on the planet.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's very true.
But then the Mayhem album cover is kind of similar in that it's very understated. It's just like, black and white with some, I don't know what color that is. What color is the church there?
It's all just kind of one color of blue. Honestly, it's like a deep cobalt blue.
But yeah, so it's kind of the same vibe of, just very stripped down. And that's kind of because black metal, this early Norwegian scene had much more of a mission statement than, like death metal or whatever. They very much wanted to strip away a lot of this, stuff that was surrounding metal. They wanted it to be like really raw and primal. And you can hear that in the music. there's I think it was Fenris of or no, that's not his fucking name. How do you Fenriz maybe? But anyway, one of the like big black metal drummers, he's gone on record saying like my job is to unlearn the drums because I want it to just be like primal banging around. I don't want to think about like, okay, this is the 16th beat, so I need to do this. So that's kind of the vibe of black metal.
So like you said before, lo-fi is a big part of black metal in a weird way.
Yeah, so and it's because early on it was just because they were kids in their bedroom, you know what I mean, that just had a shitty little tape recorder, and that's what they recorded their demo on. And that's, you know, like Dark Throne, their first two albums, that's what it was. They were being, you know, put on these kind of, you know, bigger labels for the time, but they were still just like in their bedroom. And that kind of became part of the aesthetic and part of, you know, some people really tried to maintain that because they, like I said, and we'll get into this, black metal has more of a mission statement and it's more kind of ideologically driven. And part of it is they want it to remain this like pure thing that isn't commercialized, that isn't, you know, really there for everybody to get, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think yeah, from what you mentioned, where it's like it's kind of off the beaten path, so to speak, compared to stuff like Megadeth or Iron Maiden, where it definitely is a little more, how do I say, marketable.
Yeah, and like obviously black metal has gotten big, kind of despite the best efforts of some of the early artists. But yeah, and like we'll get into that, but it was very much kind of a purity culture in a way where it's like, oh, okay, either you really get it or you're a poser and we don't want you here.
Yeah, and that can be kind of toxic in the wrong hands, you know?
No, it's like I appreciate that it's deeply weird, and I think that's what makes it so great. But
yeah,
also when you're like, we don't want other people in here, it's led to some very bad things, and I think it's let some very bad ideologies flourish, and we will talk about that.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
But yeah, right below that, I just had some examples of corpse paint, so you would know what I was talking about.
Yeah, that makes more sense. I wonder if even if it looks like fucking Kiss ripped these guys off.
Yeah. So yeah, people like to be like, no, Kiss did it first. And it's like they were doing a different thing because, you know, Kiss had the fucking cat, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're
and like I get it.
The tongue, Gene Simmons coming down on a fire stage and just going blah blah blah, yeah. Just scaring the audience.
You know, it's kind of the same thing. It's kind of not, but I don't know. I think it's funny. But so this top image on the left is Dead on the left and Euronymous on the right there. Next to them on the right is Immortal, like the band Immortal. And they're kind of the early Norwegian scene. Immortal is kind of the ones that are just completely safe. You know what I mean? They have just never said anything questionable. They've never, you know what I mean? They just don't get into it. They're like, look, I'm not going to talk about that. My lyrics are about my made up kingdom. You know what I mean? They're just not interested in that in a way that's
fair.
Yeah. In a way that I think is kind of cool.
Yeah. Don't fall prey to the gossip, you know, don't fall prey to the, how do I say? I like, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, be the bigger person, stand above the drama.
Yeah, exactly. They're kind of just like, look, we just want to make this weird fucking music. Leave us alone.
Yeah.
And then beneath them is Gaul from Gorgoroth.
Gorgoroth.
Yeah. They were another early band. They've had, as a band, they're another one that's like had some really questionable things. Gaul is basically like the only really big name in like old school black metal that's just an openly gay man. And
oh, good for him.
Yeah, and even him, it's kind of like, in a lot of ways he's better than a lot of them, but also he's done some pretty violent shit, most of it in self-defense, because he'll like go to these shows and people will be like, oh, it's Gaul, he's gay, and then they'll try and mess with him and he's just like, no, I will fight you, like leave me alone.
Oh god.
So, but not all of it. Some of it is like, why did you do that, Gaul?
Yeah,
but he's worth mentioning. So,
sure, well, that's all good to know. So, I guess my next question here is, so I listened to Panopticon's album Kentucky, how do all these guys get to him?
Yeah, so that's what we're gonna get there. I'm sorry that this is like taking longer than I thought it would to get through this.
No, I'm just curious.
But no, we're gonna get.
No, I was just trying to segue. Sorry.
No, you're fine. We're gonna get there. I promise. We just have to continue to go through a little bit of this history and a little bit of this groundwork.
I am not rushing you. I promise you.
Oh no, you're fine, man. I did want to lay out a little bit of what is kind of considered stereotypical black metal and what is kind of really indicative of that early kind of 90s Norwegian scene. So
let's hear it.
Just like everything is tremolo picked. And it's unmuted tremolo picking. So just playing as fast as humanly possible and trying to make it sound like one continuous note. That does happen in death metal, but it tends to be palm muted, where it's, it's just a lot of fast notes, whereas in black metal it sounds like one note in a way.
Yeah, because you have the string ring and it just kind of blends.
Yeah. Another thing about black metal is just weird song structures. There's
okay. Yeah, I got that from this.
Yeah, like, I'm not saying it never happens, but it's not often that you're going to hear a chorus in black metal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, okay. I that's definitely adding up.
Yeah, bar chords are a big thing, and I get that, once again, like, this is used in all kinds of music, but specifically black metal uses a lot of bar chords. Like every other form of metal, it's mostly in the minor key because that just sounds evil. Vocals tend to be like screams and shrieks, whereas in death metal it tends to be lower growls.
Okay.
Overall, there's just less of a focus on technical proficiency, and it's more about atmosphere, like building a very kind of sinister, or I mean, that's the old school, is like very sinister atmosphere. And it's been used for different things, but it's very atmospheric, which is something that you heard on this.
Yeah, okay. And we'll get more into that in a second, but I can definitely see where you're coming from, where like I said, like Judas Priest compared to like, I don't have a good gauge for other black metal, but I can see how Judas Priest may be a little bit like less of an ambiance as it is kind of a jam,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And just a good way to, if it's something just really fucking weird, if they're doing something really weird, like a weird song structure, a weird chord progression, or something like that, it's probably black metal, to be frank.
Okay.
So it's kind of just the weirdest of them all, which is why I'm like, man, I really threw Tiberi into the deep end with this one.
Hey, that's what this show's about.
So kind of the ethos of black metal, so starting out, it was very much a rejection of modernity. It was these, kids who were just really pissed off at society, and they just didn't. And I mean, part of it's just they're really fucking weird. Like I said, they're the nerdiest people on the planet. And I think that was a big part of why they were like, fuck it, we're not interested in any of this stuff. We want to do our own thing. And
Sure.
The way that was expressed pretty explicitly in that early Norwegian stuff is because, Norway had a very kind of long pagan history, and a lot of it was forcibly Christianized. They felt like the symbol of modernity that had maybe kind of taken away a way of life from them was Christianity. So it was expressed with like very explicitly satanic stuff. And
that's really more so of a rejection of the church than it is actually worship of the devil, correct?
Yes, but I mean, it kind of depends. There's this really famous clip of Gaul where this person asks him like, oh, okay, what like drives your music? Like, what is your inspiration? And he's a deeply weird man, so he just goes, Satan. And they ask him to explain that. They're like, okay, what does that mean? Like, that doesn't tell us anything. So what does Satan mean? And he just goes, freedom. So
Jesus.
Yeah, so like even the ones that I think are probably, because there are some of them that were in some really intense like satanic cults. That's part of it. I think some people, it's once again, Satan is kind of this being used as this image like from Paradise Lost, where he, for better or for worse, is striving to be free and kind of pushing back against these power structures. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So, and it's like,
And it's unfortunate because, like you said, like I think a lot of people who try to use it more so as a statement rather than an actual theology are kind of lumped in with the ones who go way too far with it.
yeah, and once again, like because it's like any other religion. The vast majority of them are just people who believe in things. You know what I mean? And that's it. They just have different values, maybe, and this is how they express them. Some of the black metal people who were in these really intense kind of satanic cults, which were very small, you know what I mean? It's not like it was this big organization.
Right.
No, they just did some fucked up stuff. So it's like anything else,
Yeah, it's tough because it's like, yeah, God, you're always gonna have idiots doing things, right? And so I can't imagine. I can't imagine going with that label is really something that's going to be beneficial from a marketability standpoint commercially. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that was part of it. Is it was very much like I said, almost a purity culture where, and a lot of stuff would happen. Like not all of it. Just crazy shit would be done at concerts to kind of weed out people that they're like, oh, they're posers. So it's just weird, man. Like I said, it's interesting from a lot of kind of points, and also it wasn't obviously like a terrorist organization, but there was a lot of terrorism that went on, because the church burnings were like kind of the most famous thing to come out of the Norwegian scene.
God.
And
that's not good.
Yeah, I mean it's like the church burnings and the murders, because that happened too. And I thought that it was probably like half a dozen churches were burned, which is obviously too many. But no, it was over the course of 3 years. It was over 50. Like this was happening a lot.
That's that's yeah. Maybe chill it and don't do any.
Yeah, no. So it was legitimately a scary scene. You know what I mean? Like crazy shit happened.
Yeah, God.
So really? I kind of talked about how it was this ideological feeling of wanting to kind of go back to a past that was lost. What ideology does that sound like to you?
Don't know.
Fascism. That's what fascism is.
Oh, God.
So it was kind of, in a way, I understand how that was, fruitful breeding ground for fascism. There was one guy, basically, in that early scene who was just very racist, like very much an outspoken neo-Nazi, and he made it a safe space for other Nazis. You know what I mean?
That's not good. That's a bad thing he did.
That's very bad. So what I'm getting at is black metal has always had a Nazi problem. It still has a Nazi problem. We're gonna get into that.
So you're telling me this guy's a Nazi I listen to?
No. He is the exact opposite of that. So, and okay, that's kind of how it started. Was one guy made it a safe space for that. Because of that, fascist organizations and fascist political parties throughout Europe have poured money into straight up like Nazi black metal get-togethers and like festivals. So it has been kind of a political tool since the 90s that has been used by these far-right extremists.
Okay.
So in response to that, in the early 2000s, so that is the shorthand is NSBM, National Socialist Black Metal. In response to that, there's been a much more grassroots kind of push, where this is coming from a place of power structures. There's been a grassroots push for what is now called RABM, which is Red and Anarchist Black Metal. So people who are far on the left have been putting out a lot of black metal as well. That kind of that started in the early 2000s with actually on the internet it was rabm.blogspot.com, which was
fucking Blogspot, yeah.
and it was a last.fm group where people would just post like, "Hey, I heard this new black metal band. They're, very far left, and they're, feminist anarchists or whatever." So it kind of became a space where people were just trying to push that and be like, "Oh, okay, it doesn't have to be this way. There can be other options." That really exploded in 2016. So it was kind of a grassroots thing that wasn't making a ton of traction. And because of some political things that we all know about that happened in 2016, a lot of... Yeah. So...
I wonder what happened.
So there are more people now that are like, oh, okay, I'm going to be in an explicitly, far left black metal band. I'm going to combat the Nazis that have tried to take this musical genre. And a lot of, bigger names that were around well before this, that once this kind of, once that happened in 2016, the election, they've come out and been like, no, fuck that. Because they thought, okay, it's just some little weirdos who have their little Nazi band way over here. And then people saw like, oh, okay, this could actually be a threat. We need to make a stand.
I see.
So, Panopticon has always been, read an anarchist black metal band. It is explicitly an anarchist band. I have a couple little quotes, and I promise we're getting near the end of my spiel.
No, I mean, this is a lot of information. It's good to know, honestly, because like I said, I knew nothing. I knew nothing before today. Even the name, just knowing what black and death metal come from now, and nomenclature is helpful. So,
yeah. So, and I think it's really interesting. And I understand that it's like this with every musical genre that has subgenres. But metal is just the one that I know about. So I think it's really interesting to kind of track. Okay, this album came out and really influenced this album, which influenced that album. So I just think it's really interesting.
Sure.
So there's a quote. I have this book that I think is really cool. It's called Black Metal Rainbows. And it's just a bunch of essays from like far left people about black metal. A lot of them are musicians. Some of them are just, kind of political scholars and stuff like that. But there is some quotes about Panopticon in here from a essay called Black Metal Under the Black Flag. Panopticon's first album came out in 2008, so that was like pretty early because, like I said, it exploded in 2016. On that first album, we have a song called Flag Burner Torchbearer, and the lyrics, part of them are, "There are just a few things that I believe, that people are born free and slavery is murder, that their property is theft, and government is tyranny, anarchy is liberty." So he came out of the gate swinging. Like, he let people know what he was about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, hey, fair enough, man.
And there's just a little excerpt that talks about Kentucky specifically that I wanted to read.
Alrighty.
So, as we talked about, black metal was like a European genre, whereas, thrash was very American. And black metal is still kind of more of a European genre. So they wrote this: Kentucky conjured a uniquely American, nature-focused, working-class black metal aesthetic that has still not been replicated. As writer Craig Hayes explained in a 2012 Pop Matters essay about Panopticon's anarchism, Lund's rearrangement of black metal's parameters is resoundingly, I can't even say this word, intransigent. Hierarchies and doctrines are swept aside.
Sure.
Do what?
Sure, whatever the fuck that means.
Hierarchies and doctrines are swept aside. His work challenges orthodox black metal philosophies, but it also challenges his own artistry. It's revolutionary in its spirit and substance.
Okay.
So, that's kind of how we got here. Panopticon is one guy. His name is Austin Lund. He did everything on this album that you heard except for the fiddle.
I really, that shocks me. I like, one person doing all of that is intense. Honestly, that's a hell of a lot of work. It's a lot of work with 4 people doing it, but God, one person doing all the instruments and vocals.
Yeah. Between and not only that, he puts out a lot of stuff. Like between 2008 and 2023, he'd put out 10 full-length albums, 2, EPs, I think. He was on 10 split records during that time. Like,
Wow.
he puts out an ungodly amount of music. But that's not uncommon in black metal for a band to be one guy doing everything.
That's again, that's wild.
Yeah, and that's kind of all the lead up I wanted to give you. I wanted to kind of teach you about what black metal sounds like, where it came from, and kind of why it is a battleground, like an ideological battleground, where there are a lot of bands that are far right, there are a lot of bands that are far left, and then there are bands like Immortal that are surprisingly kind of the minority who just don't care and don't say anything about it.
Yeah, I know. First of all, thank you for going through all of that, because it's all really good information. It's interesting to know that so much of metal is so politically and ideologically driven, in ways that, like, we go back to, like, say, like what we did with Black Sabbath and what we did with Less Than Jake. Like, there's things to be said there, but I definitely don't know that there was much in a sense of anything specific, where it's like Dio's, like, writing is very much like, the world is out to, like, kings and queens rule the world, you got to keep up or else you're going to fall out and you won't be able to live. And it's just like, that's a great statement, but it's not like, I feel like it's not targeting anything particular. This feels very, like, targeted, especially in this context for this album.
Yeah, and I think that, I one of the reasons I picked this album was it came out in 2012, if I remember right, and it was kind of a watershed moment for specifically, RABM, Red and Anarchist Black Metal. This was kind of the first album that people were like, oh, this is just a real thing that can really be a big part of the scene, and it can be its own scene. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
And it's, with like Nazi black metal, it has a very kind of particular sound where it's just aping those early 90s bands. And as we saw here, and that's part of why it is maybe a more cohesive scene, is because if you like one band that sounds exactly like this and is saying this crazy far right shit, you're probably going to like them all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas, RABM is a lot more varied in its sound. This would technically fall under this would be technically be considered atmospheric black metal, and we'll talk about that. And it would also be listed under folk metal, which kind of has its own its own baggage. I think that a lot of time folk metal can come across as very, like, kitschy, but this I think really works because it's not using it as a gimmick. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But that's everything I had. I know I kind of just info dumped on you, but I am ready to get into the album whenever you are.
Yeah, again, thank you for that. No, it's a lot to process. But then you're also going over how many different genres and subgenres in a matter of an hour. It's kind of hard to. There's so much to talk about there. I'm sure there's a lot more we could talk about, but yeah. Let's get over. Let's get into this here. Let's get into Kentucky by Panopticon. So we start off with the first track here on this album. Oh, before I get into this, album art looks to be just kind of a superimposed silhouette of a miner, and it's like a young boy in mining gear next to him.
Yeah.
And in the background, it looks to be like just trees and like nature.
Yeah, and a lot of his albums, especially from this point on, the covers are just nature. And as we'll see, that is something that he clearly cares a lot about. And if I remember correctly, I don't know about this one specifically, but a lot of his album covers that are just these nature shots are taken by his wife, who is a photographer.
Oh, cool. That's interesting. But yeah, so it's a pretty chill album cover, honestly. I mean, so it clearly and directly ties into why this is a part 2. And this is because 2 weeks ago, we watched the documentary Harlan County, USA, per Matt's recommendation. So with that, this looks to be, and as we'll see in the lyrics, pretty heavily inspired by those events. And clearly from his political perspective as well, we'll get to see in his lyrics kind of how he portrays that in his music. So without further ado, we'll get started here. Bernheim Forest in Spring is the first track on this album. It is an instrumental. And so it is actually just straight up folk track, like an Appalachian, almost like a bluegrass track. Just, I guess it sounds like there might be a banjo, a guitar, a string instrument like that. And it's just a jam for about 20, about 2.5 minutes. I mean, I was a bit shocked. I was like, this is not a black metal album. I must have the wrong thing. Clearly I didn't at the time. I could see it, but I was like, this is a very strange choice to start an album with. And that's something so like you said, I think I'm kind of picking up on the structure a little bit of not only the songs individually, but this album. And this album does this interesting thing where you'll have a song like this, which is very traditional, very bluegrass, very Appalachian folk, and then it will cut straight to a black metal, more, how do I say? It is completely different, but with the same subject matter. And it alternates back and forth pretty one by one, it seems like, actually. So really interesting structure there. I'm not really a huge bluegrass aficionado, to be honest. I don't listen to it too much, or Appalachian folk, whatever you want to call that. But it was a nice little jam, the first track. So not really much else to say from my side on that.
Yeah, I really like that one. I think that it kind of carries a lot of interesting melodies. I think that the banjo is maybe used in ways that I don't see that much. When I think of bluegrass banjo, I think of those dudes who are just fucking shredding that thing. And
that's true.
This is just kind of used to carry the melody in a slower way, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that is fair. Sometimes, like you have with so many instruments, you just kind of go as fast as you can, like, and that's all it is. You can kind of gets a little like lost in itself, you know. So I like it when things go a little slower. Okay, so yeah, I guess moving on. Second track, sorry, Bodies Under the Fall. So like I said, pretty immediately, this is much heavier. Starts off with a pretty like intense drum line, heavier guitar, and you got this flute that comes in. I guess it's like a flute. Is that what that is?
I think it's technically a tin whistle.
Okay.
I have seen a lot of people say, or not a lot of people, but there's definitely this kind of opinion floating around that people are like, oh, okay, these black metal songs would be perfect black metal songs if it wasn't for that fucking tin whistle. I like it.
Okay.
I think it's a perfectly fine way to add a little bit of melody to a song that wouldn't have that much otherwise, you know?
Sure. To be honest, didn't hit me the best. I was like, oh, that's a little odd. Not that it was bad, but I was like, oh, this is different. So yeah, I can see that complaint for sure, but I also understand what you're getting at, where it's like it does carry a melody. It serves a purpose. It's not just there for no reason. It's just a matter of preference, I think, at that point. But yeah, I mean, so again, this really heavy sound, and so pretty quickly, we get into the vocals on black metal tracks, and as you mentioned, a lot of screaming. I'm not saying this as an insult. I would not be able to tell what the lyrics were unless I had the lyric sheet.
No.
Absolutely no way.
So I have like a trained ear at this point. I would not be able to tell with these either. There are some black metal and death metal bands I can just understand what they're saying. This is not one of them. I think partly because the delivery's a little unintelligible, and partly because the mixing, it kind of gets lost in with the rest of the music, you know what I mean? It's not brought up in
like
a
you
way
said,
that a lot of vocals
it's a
are.
that raw mix you talked about before. I definitely can see that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And this is no, I'm sorry. This is not like a very lo-fi raw sound in that the way that old school stuff is, but you can still, like you're saying, you can still see that where it's being mixed in kind of a unique way where it all kind of clashes together. And it sounds more clear than that stuff, but it's still being done in a unique way.
Right. I can see that. So going into the lyrics, that is one thing I did like about this whole album, actually. We get into the lyrics of this song, and so Bodies Under the Falls. From what I understand, this whole track is kind of referencing really those who lost their lives in the mining work, in coal mines, and in the intense labor. And it kind of the lyrics here are kind of almost personifying like the nature around that as the only witnesses to these, like tragedies. Where it says, the ancestral forests where only trees now know the horrors seen here. And then it says, a nation left to weep like spilling water over the falls. It's really like very pretty imagery, which is really interesting when you put it with the juxtaposition of the screaming. But yeah, I looked at the lyrics before I hit the song, and I was like, oh, this looks pretty so far. And then the screaming, I was like, wait. Oh, I mean, it didn't detract from it, of course, because it's still the lyrics, but it's like, it's an interesting way to do that. It gives it definitely some energy, and that maybe just in some ways that just speaking it, you wouldn't have, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and this one, I didn't do a ton of research on, because this one I think is the only one that's not explicitly about like coal mining and stuff. This
Okay.
one, the last line is beneath the cliffs where, I don't know how to say this, Yahweh falls forever weeps. So that's in Kentucky, that is a waterfall. As I understand it, there was a massacre there where, some white settlers basically told, a Native American community, hey, be at this waterfall, and, your children will be taken to this school where they're going to learn, English and, all this, whatever. And instead of that happening, they slaughtered the Native Americans. So if I understood it correctly, and that reference, that's what this is about.
That makes a lot more sense because that brings a lot more credence to the Cherokee, and that waterfall. The name of that waterfall, it says, tribal souls sleep. That makes a lot more sense now. Where it says like, bullets for every pale face, and that makes a lot more sense to me. So yeah, definitely tragic. Definitely something understandable to be upset about. So it's it's terrible that happened. I mean, whether it's the coal miners or this too. I mean, with that context, it definitely is about Native American, tragedy, which is awful. But God, this song is very, very intense. Like I said, the lyrics are they're very visual. It says, the blood-stained stones in the deep, morosely contrasting against Appalachian green, flows into the river whisked away, which is heavy. You can see blood. It's like, oh God.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about black metal is so often the lyrics are very like pretty and poetic, and you will never understand what they're saying. It's like you've really kind of wasted your poetry here.
Yeah. Oh God.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of really great imagery. Like obviously it's horrific, but yeah, what you just said, here where there's a couple lines that I really liked. There's the one where he talks about the waterfall like it's crying, like he kind of personifies the waterfall as like this, just this like flood of tears. I'm not finding it right off, but like I thought that was really pretty.
Yeah, it says where the falls forever weep.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. That's it is very pretty. So as far as like the song structure too, so this, I guess is going back to what I said a second ago, kind of the individual song structure. So we start off as really heavy. You got that kind of tin whistle thing coming in and out. And then he does his chorus, his verse rather. He does his verse. He sings his parts. And then it really just starts to kind of get into this almost kind of chill breakdown. A third of the way through the song, where it gets a little more melodic, and it just kind of slows down, and it's almost like, frankly, it's almost very kind of like a punk riff, where it just kind of is just like more upbeat, and then it just kind of it takes that riff and kind of calms down a little more, and then it just slowly fades into this um kind of, again, bluegrass or folk kind of line with a banjo again. And it goes from this very angry, kind of like loud noise to a very soft, happy one for like 3 or 4 minutes. And there's like no lyrics at all. And it just kind of holds that. And I'm just like, well, this is granted, this is, everyone knows this song's 10 minutes long. So it's like, it holds up for 3 or 4 minutes. And it was nice. And then it just kind of really abruptly crescendos back in where it says the rhythm of the water. And it kind of hits again right there. And then it's alluding to how nature was the only thing that was around to see all this, that had to watch this tragedy occur. And I want to make a note. This is very, and I'm not sure if you'll understand this when I say it, but this is very like Midwest emo in a lot of ways. That really kind of intense screaming with a light melody at this part, that is a very emo thing to do, by Midwest emo specifically. Like, that's insanely similar to that. I was kind of shocked. I was like, this is black metal? I guess there's some overlap there I wasn't aware of.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting.
And this album definitely isn't like that old school black metal, like that prototypical
Sure.
black metal sound.
Sure.
So yeah, like there's a lot of stuff going on here, and that's part of why I like this album so much, is you can listen to these songs again and again and you'll pick up on different stuff because it's all just, it's like a tossed salad. It's like they just throw everything into one bowl and you just kind of have to pick through it. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, and so we continue from that part, and it gets very screamy again, which is fine. And then and then it kind of ends from there. But the one thing I did notice on this, and you can maybe answer this question. This is more of a musicality question as well. Is it typical in this genre to have the drums intentionally offbeat a little bit like that? It seemed so intentional to me. It was like, I was almost galloping just like a quarter of a beat off. It was interesting.
So, I mean, dissonance is kind of a big thing in black metal, where like you kind of purposefully will make things a little off.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
one thing I didn't touch on is blast beat. Which I don't know enough about it to even say like, oh, this is for sure a blast beat. But that's a big thing in like death metal and black metal, and there's a very specific definition of what it is, and I don't know enough about drumming to even be like, this is exactly what it is. But that might be an effect of that, because that's a very intentional thing that's done in black metal.
I had thought so, because it wasn't that it sounded like bad per se. I just think with my untrained ear, I think, because I'd seen it later in the album too. I think maybe with my untrained ear, it was just something I noticed because I'm not used to hearing anything like that. And I just was like, oh, that's interesting to me. What is that? And maybe I'm just looking too much into things, but yeah, it's like you said, I could definitely see, like you said, there's some interesting things going on with the mixing there, and it might just be what I'm hearing as well. But yeah, I mean, that was really all I had for the first song. I think we covered pretty much everything from my side. Is there anything I looked over?
No, I don't think so. I do like how it all melts away and just leaves that banjo.
Yeah, it does have that, like, that kind of fade out with the banjo, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. I always thought that was really cool. And I think that's kind of why I feel like it's not so much a gimmick. Like, I've heard other, Appalachian, like, hard rock and metal bands where it's very much a gimmick, and it's like, oh, I'm a hillbilly gonna go to the still, and like it
My
just
moonshine.
feels, yeah, it just feels kind of gross to me. But this actually feels like an exploration of both black metal and like Appalachian folk in a way, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I'm really not as learned on bluegrass or folk as I could be, but I think it's, if you said to me this is a metal album and you showed me that track or parts of that track, I'd be like, no way in hell, that's metal. What are you talking about? So, again, it's interesting. Like you said, it's the unconventional song structure. It is definitely memorable in a way, in ways I think a lot of bands aren't. Um, and I will say, like, there's a few aspects that maybe my ear I'm not really jiving with 100%. But like, but then there's other parts where it's like where I'm bobbing my head. I'm like, yeah, that's some good ass guitar. That's some good ass like screaming. Like this is pretty sick. And it's just like you said, maybe it's I think you mentioned to me before. It's an acquired taste.
Yeah, yeah. The first time I heard black metal, I didn't like it. You know.
Sure. Yeah, and it's not that I don't like it per se. It's that, well, maybe I don't like it now. I'll say that. And it's like I definitely hear elements I really like, and there's parts like I said where I'm bobbing my head like, yeah, this is great shit. Okay, I'm into this. And then there's parts like sometimes that just kind of doesn't hit me the right way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that is, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Not only is this a kind of a, maybe a genre you're not used to, and it's one that, like I said, is an acquired taste and is pretty out there. But not
Yeah,
only that, but a big part of a lot of black metal is experimentation. I think part of
sure.
that is where it's like there's just going to be a lot of weird stuff going on. You know what I mean? And not all of it's going to always work for everybody, you know?
But like you said, so much of this just kind of felt very. There was such an ambiance to it, and I did appreciate. It felt very airy. It felt very like light, which I liked a lot. It was weird. It's one of those things where it's light, but it's obviously very heavy. So it's like a light kind of vibe, but like a heavy sound.
Yeah,
Um,
and part of that might be that's another thing that's big in black metal is it's like the guitar is a lot more of a treble kind of sound. There's not much bass in black metal,
that's
whereas
true, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, whereas like death metal, there's going to be a lot more of a low bassy sound, and that's
Hmm.
another way that you can kind of be like, oh, okay, this is probably black metal just because I'm not hearing a lot of bass in this.
That makes sense too. Yeah, because that definitely attributes to the airiness I just kind of described there. Okay, cool. So I guess without further ado, track three, "Come All Ye Coal Miners." So I think I've heard this song before. Was it not in the documentary sung by somebody?
No, so this one probably was. You might be thinking of. So let's see here. I'm gonna make sure I get the names right. So this was written by Sarah Ogan Gunning. I know it was in Harlan County, USA. That's part of why I wanted to kind of pair these. Is so many of the
Yeah,
songs are covered. You might be
yeah.
thinking of Which Side Are You On, which we saw Florence Reese, who was the original writer. We saw her perform it.
Yes, yeah. No, that one I was familiar with. I wasn't sure if this one I'd heard. 'Cause it sounded so familiar. I couldn't. I thought I'd heard it in the documentary, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
So
it's definitely in there at one point.
okay, okay. That's what I thought. I just want to make sure. But yeah. So we've heard this before. Now, again, this is a black metal album, and I mentioned before that it alternates from song to song. There's like almost, if I'm not mistaken, this doesn't even have like an electric guitar in it. Like there's not even any screaming in this song at all. It is a almost strictly just kind of high energy bluegrass or Appalachian folk song. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, this one's straight up bluegrass, man. And
It
that I mean, some of them just are. You know what I mean? Like some of them just
yeah.
are black metal. Some of them just are bluegrass.
That's so interesting to me. But yeah, his voice here is really nice. It's nice to hear him kind of singing naturally, and he's got a really nice voice, honestly. Um, it's the banjo playing's great. The instrumentals are great on this. Um, so again, the song's really about obviously the coal miner's son and living the Appalachian life and how where it's they feel like their lives are being ruined and that they're being oppressed and destroyed by these companies and the money tied up within them and all that stuff and definitely is not anything new given the documentary we watched. Ties on a lot, of course, thematically with the events that happened there. But yeah, it's a pretty straightforward message on this, I think. And again, it's just very much anti-industry or the anti it's pro union in this sense where it's trying to have people try to unite against the oppression they're experiencing, which is, again, go watch a documentary, Harlan County, USA, if you want to learn more about that, because of a lot more detail. But yeah, as a song, it's just pretty straightforward, a nice song. I don't have any complaints.
Yeah, and I think this one is an interesting inclusion because not only is it like pro-union, it's pretty anti-capitalist. The
Yeah, yeah.
last two lines are, "Let's sink this capitalist system in the darkest pits of hell," um, which is
Oh boy.
pretty funny. But I think it's interesting because we don't learn how kind of radical a lot of Appalachia's history is. Um, and a lot of Appalachian culture used to be a lot more radical, and that's really kind of it's not taught is all I'm getting at. So it's
Sure.
interesting to see these kind of old Appalachian kind of folk songs that they're like, okay, no, I see what the problem is. We're being abused by capitalism, and it's like, damn, y'all just said it, damn.
Yeah, it's very much just kind of like, fuck you, I don't. It's very Rage Against the Machine. It's like, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. It's funny. Um, yeah, so it's again really really pretty song as far as the actual sonic side goes for me. So, and anything else on that one? I thought that was pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, and I do think, if I remember right, this is the first time on the album that we see a sample being used to kind of build
Ah,
atmosphere.
yes. Yeah, at the
Where,
very end of this song, I think it's another quote that we saw from the documentary, actually, where
yeah,
he's basically saying that every single penny that's spent on safety, food, wages, it's money coming out of the employee's pocket, and it's like it very, very much implies that the people in that industry, today, still, I'm not about today, but historically speaking, at least in this documentary's perspective, it was pretty obvious that they were expendable in the eyes of a lot of people, in the eyes of industry. So it's just really fucked up. They don't care about the people; they care about the bottom line, which is terrible. But
yeah. So and there's kind of you hear the machinery going on in the background and all this stuff.
oh
So
yeah,
I think it's kind of the first super just atmospheric, like not even music going on. He's just building an atmosphere. You know what I mean?
yeah, for sure. So. And that actually segues really well into the next song, Black Soot and Red Blood. Again, more of a traditional black metal song. So again, so this song was not a cover, correct? This is an original song.
Yeah, the only covers are the straight up like bluegrass ones with lyrics. So there's like the bluegrass instrumentals, those are not covers. And then Black Waters, which is a really kind of weird take on a folk song. But
Yeah. Okay. Well. Yeah.
the covers are Come All Ye Coal Miners, Which Side Are You On, and Black Waters.
Okay. Interesting. Um. So yeah, for Black Soot and Red Blood, that is track number 4. Again, great lyrics. Tonight, one of them being "Tonight, the disharmonic symphony of the cicadas plague my ears," which is like Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
That's
once again, it's like the prettiest line I've ever heard, and he's just like screaming it unintelligibly.
um. But yeah, and the lyrics kind of go on to say, like these families are starving in the hills, and it's just eerily quiet. That you're exposed to the elements. Is a really good line where it just hold out just one more day. Say the same tomorrow. Say the same tomorrow. And it's like that's just too relatable. Where it's like it'll be okay. Tomorrow will be okay. But it's like, well, no, actually tomorrow will be okay. That's fucked.
Yeah, and
um,
I think that's a really and kind of the repetition I think is really interesting. And right after that, it's for the union hold out for a fair wage and living this sorrow for a fair wage and a living this sorrow. And I don't I just think that once again great lyrics, but it's kind of using that repetition to really drive home the point where it's like just talking about the sacrifice on a human level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, where it's like you can't even eat, you can't even do anything, let alone have a car, let alone own a house. It's just like Jesus Christ, like it's just one of those things. Like you can watch on a documentary, but it's another thing to live it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so it's tough, but it kind of the song kind of goes on from there. I mean, it's basically just kind of saying, going back to the context of Harlan County, USA, the documentary. It's basically just saying like it's almost like how do I say, a call to the cause, where it's like, we gotta live for the union. We gotta do this for the union. It's the only way it's gonna work. It's the only way it's gonna make things right by us. It's the only thing that's gonna keep us going forward until they meet our demands. Remember Bloody Harlan, or this is Bloody Harlan, and then again it does that same thing, which I know you're a sucker for, where it does the sample, and so it goes from this really, really heavy kind of screaming, and it pretty quickly just kind of chills out into this really beautiful like acoustic guitar solo and like vibe for again another 3 or 4 minutes. Again, kind of like the first the second song, "Body is Under the Falls." Is that right? Yeah. So it kind of does the same thing that song does, but on this song, it's a little different. It's an acoustic guitar, almost kind of leading the melody on that. And it's really, really pretty. But then they overlay a very long piece of dialogue sample from Harlan County, USA. Where there's a man, he's talking about how they worked in the mines 10 hours a day, and they got 6 and a fraction cents an hour, which is fucking crazy.
So one thing that, and I don't think we talked about this in the documentary because this was in the documentary, but this guy was 8 years old and he was doing this job. He was a breaker boy. So he was 8 years old, and him and the other 8-year-olds were like, fuck it, we're going on strike.
Motherfucker, when I was 8 years old, I was playing Mario Party 4 with my sisters. Like, Jesus God. Like,
That,
I can't imagine this.
that's a unique kind of pain when you try and twirl the joystick with your palm,
Motherfucker, blaming on the crane. I could do that shit for 8 hours, 10 hours a day. But Jesus.
So, we all have our cross to bear. Some people work in the mine. Some people get that scar that you have on your palm from Mario Party.
Truly, the heroes of the working class Mario Party pros. No.
It's like you go to a union meeting and there's like all this working class iconography, and the guy comes out and he goes, wah.
Fucking, I fucking would definitely vote for Waluigi for union president of any union. But anyway, so Waluigi be damned. So he kind of goes on and it talks about how they would literally be beat if they missed one piece of slate that came through, and it's just it's insane. And basically he's just kind of explaining like we fought so hard, and we went against the grain just because we knew it was right for us, and we had to fucking fight, and all it was just, it was an increase from 6.5 to 8 cents an hour. It's like, oh God. I mean, I know it's a lot, percentage wise, but I'm just saying, like, oh my God, my perspective on that is just, I can't even imagine that. Like, it's literally impossible for me to imagine with today's economy, like what that was like to live like that. And I'm not shaming them. What I mean is, like, I would hope that would be better opportunity for them working such a crazy manual labor job, and that is just shocking to me still today. Yes, you could say, yeah, things cost less by then, sure, but not that little.
Yeah, I don't. Obviously, we don't know what year he would have been working, or we could figure out inflation, but I'm sure it was very little. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And every time I hear this part, I just, not only do I think like, oh, these poor kids, like he's 8 years old doing this manual labor and getting beat by a grown man, but I feel so bad for his mother that had to send him out. You know what I mean? Because that she had all these responsibilities at the home, so like she had to send her kids out, and that's just so sad.
And not only that, can you imagine being a mother and a wife and then seeing your husband and son both go to work? like in this terrible place. Like, oh my God, I would hate myself like for letting it happen. It is what it is. I mean, again, not to shame the profession of coal mine. What I'm saying is like knowing that they're mistreated, and you know, knowing that they could have had better. It's sad. It's just sad knowing that they got so sick and so yeah, just worn down. So because of the hard jobs they had. And so yeah, but basically it's this really nice kind of 3 or 4 minute like acoustic guitar, just kind of relax. It's very chill, very relaxing. And I'm like, wow, okay, this is, and I was really vibing with that. I was like, this is like a really nice, some good shit. There's some guitars that come in, some guitar mini happens. You got some nice layering there, and I was like, oh, this is good. I like this. I'm bobbing my head. And then I had the same comment you had on Less Than Jake, where it's like, where'd the ska go? And I'm like, oh, there's the black metal, and he comes back and the screams. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, it's back. Okay.
And one thing I think is really cool about this whole piece with the sample and everything is so it's like he's kind of, so he lays out, okay, this is the problem, and he lays out what he learned from this interaction.
Yeah.
And he says first the union officials came to us, like to these literal children, and they're like, hey, you need to get back to work, you're violating the agreement. And I don't know, maybe one was like 11 and he was the leader, and he goes, to hell with the agreement, we're striking. They're like, we don't give a shit.
Oh my
And
God.
and let's see who comes next. So it was the union officials, and then the politicians came. So
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of politician this was, but some kind of elected official comes and's like, hey kids, y'all need to get back to coal mining. And they're like, fuck off, we're getting our demands met. And then
Oh my
the
God.
Catholic priests come, and I imagine they're like, hey, you're gonna go to hell if you don't get back to the coal mines. And they're like, you know what, we're tired of your shit, we're striking. And
And I'm standing there in the coal mine going, apostatize, and I'm like, oh God.
But what I'm getting at is it's like he's kind of laying out what he learned, and as he tells the story and he's like, okay, this is what happened, this is what I learned from it, the music builds. Like it starts with this very like beautiful just acoustic guitar by itself, and it builds and it builds and it builds until there's just these guitars just kind of shredding, and then
Yeah.
it goes full on black metal again. And to me it almost feels like he's like getting his power back, and he's realizing, oh, this is how strong we can be. And as he realizes that, the music kind of swells around him.
Yeah, and it's almost like he's just getting angry, and it's just kind of a catharsis, which I think worked well because of that kind of gradual crescendo. Definitely a really interesting kind of way. Like, also is a great example of like if you take any like moment that is actually like a human moment, and then you put like really nice or interesting music over it, it magnifies it, which shows the power of music in a lot of ways. Like a good song, a good track can really fucking just set a tone. Fucking case in point being Bloodborne, fucking Garamond's track. God damn, like that's a good track. No, sorry, spoilers by the way, but yeah, good ass track. But that goes back to what I was saying. Like the song kind of ends on that like more angry note. Again, I don't vibe so much with that part of it, to be honest. Like the screaming, like this screaming explicitly in this song at the end. But yeah, it kind of ends on that, and it cuts pretty quickly into another sample where it's just a crowd of people yelling shame, 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 and it's like, oh Jesus, like it sounds very chaotic, just really angry, and so it just kind of keeps going on that sample. And then, and then it cuts to a different line from a sample. It says, 91 years old. You need to calm down, sir. That's police brutality. And it says, I'm ready to die. Are you? And I was like, what is going on?
It sounds like an older woman, like by the voice, and she's just like yelling. She's like, I'm ready to die. Are you? And I'm like, Jesus, lady.
God.
Before we moved on from this one, there were a few lyrics I just wanted to highlight because I really like them.
Sure.
So before the sample comes in, I like this one a lot. Meet them in the streets, meet them in the hollers, meet them in the hills, and don't back down. Don't back down. And I just think that's cool. It's like this is what we have to do, just stand up. And then at the end, when that part that you're talking where it just like sounds very angry, it ends with the right to live and work, sacrificing body and land. From Kentucky to West Virginia, the workers rise and fall, while wringing hands profit off of it all. And it's just like, damn, that's sad.
Yeah, it really is. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think to tell you the truth, this was probably my favorite track on the album.
It's my
Was
favorite
this one?
too.
Yeah, this one was by far, I think. I think it had the best like kind of overall mix for me, where it had that kind of lighter part, it had that really intense kind of beginning, but it wasn't too much. And then it had the interesting kind of samples in there. It was a really cool track. Definitely got parts of it I'm not like I don't vibe with per se, but overall, really good. So I enjoyed it. So with that, is there anything else I missed on this one?
No, I think we covered it pretty well. Like I said, I think that one's my favorite as well. I like that one and the last, like, pretty strictly black metal one, which is Killing the Giants as They Sleep. I like that one a lot as well. But this one I like quite a bit. I'm like you. I think it finds this really nice balance of black metal and atmosphere and
Yeah.
some kind of folk elements. So I think it's a really good mix of kind of what this album is.
Yeah, I can see that being the case. With the more atmospheric things, especially too. So that's a good note as well. I do want to note. So the next song on this is the cover called "Which Side Are You On?" I do want to I do want to note that this last song here ended on that section of people yelling "shame, shame, shame," and then my Spotify was going on to "Which Side Are You On?" and then falling right in between for a commercial break. It just went from shame, shame, shame to hey, it's Jennifer Coolidge with the Discover Cashback app. And I was like, oh god.
They knew. Shame on the Discover Cashback app.
And I was just like, that's hilarious. It's like, oh, fuck you for siding with the money. Discover's Cashback app, get it now. No, but
Austin Lund just shows up at your house and like grabs you by the shoulder and shakes you. He's like, "You didn't do the Cashback app, did you?"
So yeah, which side are you on? We heard this in the documentary. You said it was written by Loretta.
I believe it's Florence Reese is her name. Yeah,
Oh,
Florence
sorry, I don't know why I thought Loretta.
Yeah, there's no Lorettas.
I don't know who the fuck Loretta is. So Florence Reese, yeah, we heard her sing this. I want to say it was like at a convention or like a ceremony for the union.
Yeah, I think it's just like a big union meeting, and they had Florence
Yeah.
Reese come out and sing, and she was like, she's like, I don't have a good voice, but if you want me to sing, I guess I will.
Yeah, and so basically, the whole being of the song is, kind of saying, there's no in the middle if you live here in this situation. If you live here, if you work here, like, which side are you on? You're either with us or against us. That's kind of the whole message of the song, which is covered in the movie a lot more in depth.
Yeah. One thing I really like. Oh, I'm sorry. You go ahead.
Oh no, it's nothing we haven't heard before from the movie's perspective, but it's still his take on it. Again, is a much more traditional bluegrass on this, and I think he does a good job of that, honestly. But yeah, we've already heard all these lyrics pretty explicitly, attacking the problems they're seeing. So
Yeah, and one thing I like about this cover that I've heard a lot of covers of Which Side Are You On? Like that one has become a real staple of like union music. More so than any of these others. But I really like kind of the driving bass drum beat that's just throughout the whole thing. It's just dun dun dun
yeah,
dun. And
that's a very that's that very folk kind of driver, isn't it?
yeah, and you don't see that so much with this one, like in when other people cover it. But I think that combined with just the repetition of which side are you on, which side are you on, which side are you on. It's just like creating this real urgency where it's like motherfuckers just pick.
Yeah.
Like which side are you on? You have to decide.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And there's
Yeah.
also the little refrain of "Oh Death," which is another song that we heard in Harlan County. But that was, I don't know if you remember, that was just the like very old man, for lack of a better way of
Yes,
saying it.
yes, I do remember that.
So yeah, they just kind of, he just kind of threw that in there, and I thought that was a really kind of cool thing.
Yeah, I thought that was out of place. That's not in the original song, is it?
No, no, that's like an even more kind of traditional. I mean, I'm gonna say Appalachian folk, but it might, it probably comes from like England or Ireland or some shit.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, yeah, that's kind of an even more traditional song.
Yeah, okay. Well, that makes sense. 'Cause I saw that and I was like, huh, was that in the original one? I don't remember that. Um, but yeah, cool. Um, it's I do like the line here at the end too, where it says, my dad, he was a miner. He's now in the air and sun. He'll be with you, fellow workers, till every battle's won. And it's like, just because people aren't here anymore doesn't mean they're not with you. Carry on their memory.
Yeah, and that's because I know some people. I've seen interpretations of that where it's just like, oh, okay, he's out of the mine. He's in the sun. He's not in there anymore. He's on strike. I'm like you. I kind of interpret it as he has died, and he's just in spirit still with these workers. There's a very famous labor organizer who was named Joe Hill, who was murdered by the bosses that he was leading a strike against, or organizing against, or whatever. And I don't have it in front of me, so I can't see it, but in his final words, if I remember correctly, were "Don't cry, organize." And people always talk about how like Joe Hill is still with us, like that motherfucker died fighting.
That's funny. Um, Not funny, but you know what I mean. Uh, but yeah, cool. I think that's it for this one. From my side, like I said, pretty straightforward on this one from a sonic perspective as well. Not to say it's bad. Um, but yeah, pretty standard, not standard, but just pretty traditional bluegrass fare. So okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The I'm like you. The very traditional bluegrass ones. It's he does them very well, but it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, I've heard this done this way, which is why I like his cover of Black Water so much, because it's very unique, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, sure is. Okay, so Killing the Giants as They Sleep. This is the third and final true black metal song on this album. So, pretty quickly here. Oh, no, sorry. I forgot. So, at the very after the very last refrain of that last song, "Which side are you on?" It says for the last time, "Which side are you on?" And then it fucking immediately you're just screaming, and I'm like, what the my fucking note here is literally says, what the actual fuck is happening? Is my actual note. And I was like, what is going on?
It's just a fucking wall of sound with this primal scream and the fastest, like, playing drums as fast as humanly possible, And
It
it's
took me
abrupt.
by surprise. Oh my god! I was just like, okay, yeah, bluegrass. And I was like, whoa! I was like, oh Jesus. Um, uh, but yeah. So basically, starts off pretty heavy. I kind of like how this one's sounding so far when it starts off heavy. I think of the three, the first one, Bison of the Falls, is my least favorite sonically. But I can vibe with this one. I think it's a pretty firm second place for me as far as the black metal songs go. But starts off pretty heavy, and so I hear again that kind of intentional, almost offbeat kind of thing I'm hearing. So I noticed that again here. Just want to point that out. And so it hard cuts pretty abruptly into this from the last song. Really great lyrics here. And something I see here in the first little verse, I'll say, it says, "We wept as we passed through the mountains, clothed in July clouds," which is beautiful. And then it says, "Under the restraint of power lines, their fury bursting through the summer haze, as ethereal music filled the air." And it's like, oh wow, that's just, I immediately have an image in my mind,
Yeah, The writing is deeply beautiful, which is, like I was saying, I love black metal so much, like despite all of its flaws. Um, but because it is like such a weird, unique form of art that I think it can be so deeply beautiful in such interesting ways. And I think this song is a very good example of that. Not only are the lyrics just so good, but also like there's just sonically like so much going on, and at one point he's just fucking shredding, and it's not even a guitar solo, it's just over top of like what's already going on. It's just like, I don't even care about this, I'm just gonna throw it out there. And
Yeah.
in a lot of pieces it would be the centerpiece, and here it's just part of it.
Yeah, there's definitely. I think this one has some of my favorite guitar I hear on this whole album, um, and I think it definitely gives me a very very like airy light vibe. Um, and so one thing I notice about this delivery for his lyrics, for his screaming especially, is, and maybe you can tell me this is true for a lot of black metal. He'll scream a few words, and then he'll like repeat it'll be like a rest for the vocals, and he'll just do like about a measure or so of just noise, of just sound, and they'll come back and do another one, and they pauses. It's kind of like almost like you sing, then you pause and let the music play, then you sing again, then you pause. You know what I mean? Is that a common thing, or is that just how you decided to do it?
um I would, yes and no. There is, like I said, just like really weird song structures and things like that are very common in black metal. So part of that is, like a delivery of a few words in a line, and then, like you're saying, there's a rest, and then because it's not built in the same way where like a melody is going to work with, or there's like not even a vocal melody here, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just this like primal kind of scream over this music. And there is, are other, I'm thinking about another Appalachian black metal band that's just released their first album, and they're kind of, people seem to be kind of excited about them, like, oh, they could be really good. I don't know how you pronounce their name. It's either Eiffel or Eiffel. It's Yfel.
Huh.
But their song structures are more traditional, whereas like the vocal delivery, it's kind of like a rock and roll song, but he's just screaming. So
Yeah.
it's, like going along with the melody. And those songs even have like a chorus, which is pretty unusual in black metal. So what I'm trying to get at is you kind of just don't know what you're going to get. This is definitely more of a weird kind of experimental take on it. But
Yeah.
it's not
Okay.
always the case. You know what I mean? Like black metal is very elastic. And I think that's part
Sure.
of why, it's been, there are very far right people who think like, oh, we own this music because of XYZ. And there are very far left people who say the same thing. And I think
Yeah.
it's because as a genre, it's very elastic and weird. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. And that's something too. Like, I'm not privy to the to everyone's individual opinions as far as that stuff goes, but I definitely can see that like it's true of like anything where I would say like certain punk bands are still the same kind of punk, but it can be some variations for sure. It goes back to what I've told you before, like off mic before, where it's just like categories are great, but only you can only go so far before you start really nitpicking shit. Where it's like to the point where it's like, well, yeah, that's just band A, that's just band B. They're not different genres. They're just different bands. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think nomenclature can get a little restrictive sometimes, which is a whole nother podcast. But um, but yeah. So going back to the song itself, I did notice that wasn't a complaint of mine. I was just kind of like, oh, that's just. I wonder why if that's a thing that's prevalent or not. But it sounds like it's just kind of a case by case choice thing. Um,
Yeah. And I will say that typically black metal vocals are almost treated more like another instrument. So I think that might kind of be what we're getting at here, where a lot of the time it is lost in the mix because it's being treated as like, oh, okay, here's just this other piece of this song that I'm
yeah.
doing a weird thing with, and not necessarily like, oh, okay, we need to use these vocals in a way that is more typical, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. No, I get that entirely, actually. Um, so yeah, moving on from that point I just mentioned. So this song seems to be kind of more in meaning. I mean, it's pretty obvious in meaning, I think. Just for nature, pro the environment, and against destroying it and abusing it, whether that's coal mining or blasting mountaintops off or what have you. Um, it's pretty explicit about they're hacking at the mountain. They scrape it away for your simple need. What was formed by silent gods on the day the void first burst with sound. Again, wonderful imagery, but he's just kind of alluding to the fact it's like we're destroying these mountains that literally have been here since we could even fathom. Like, how dare you destroy this beautiful thing and this beautiful nature around us? And it gets more into that here with our little sample, because there's a pretty long sample in this song, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, yeah. And before we get into that, I just want to say I love the little phrase of your simple need, because we see that kind of with this juxtaposed against the sample and Blackwaters, where it's like you could take so much from this mountain and leave it intact. Like you could use the stream to fish. You could do all these other things that would be beneficial for you and would, satiate your needs. But instead, you're going for this one thing, this very simple need to drive industry with coal. And you are letting that ruin it. For you, you're destroying this mountain. You're destroying lives.
Yeah, yeah, but both human and natural and animal, and it's sad. Um, it truly is very sad, and that is the whole point of this song here. Um, it says you don't see it shimmering green. You see the deep hue of coal, gray smoke, and black waters in the stream. And that's obviously alluding. It's like it says poison the earth, poison the stream, killing the weary giants as they sleep. Blackened waters, sand, and soot grinding gears that halt serenity. And it's like, yeah, no matter what it is, the human race has fucked up so many things. I am passionate about nature and animals, and it's like, oh god, how the fuck have we gotten away with the shit we have, man? It's crazy. So yeah, I'm appreciative of his message here and being, like, yeah, we really should think again before we cut off mountaintops just to fucking get shit we think we need. And it's sad, but yeah, it's in between some of those lyrics there, we have our sample. And the sample, and so again, the structure of this song, we have a pretty heavy section and a very airy, light section in the beginning of the song, and then it kind of just does this really like cool guitar solo where there's just two guitar parts, and they're just kind of like very like chill riffing over each other, really nice. I want to highlight that. It's a really cool section, but then it jams there for a bit with that nice solo, and then it fades into kind of a companion piece where it fades out the electric guitar and brings in this kind of like acoustic or light string instrument where it's very like I would literally call that like a lo-fi jam for like three. It's really pretty for like 3 or 4 minutes. Again, you have a 3 or 4 minute break in the middle of the song, where it just chills the fuck out, and I'm just like, oh man, I could just fucking vibe with this shit for a while, you know?
Man, I this is a little off topic, but for the listeners at home, I take some medicine that the one of the side effects is it like just puts me to sleep. It makes me very sleepy. And last night I was laying in my bed with headphones on, listening to this album because I've been trying to listen to it a bunch just to prepare for this. And this part was playing, and I was like actively trying to fight sleep. I was like, oh, okay, this is very calming. This is very peaceful. And I fell asleep, and then maybe 2 minutes later or so, I was woken up by wow.
Yeah, no, it's again, it's that structure where you have the heavy part, the chill part, and then the heavy part again, which works. It definitely gives it that emotional kind of rawness. So during our kind of breakdown here, during our kind of lo-fi session, we'll call it, on this song, we have the sample that comes in where it's I didn't take the whole thing down, but there's this guy. He's basically explaining, like he used to live here when he was a kid, and I guess it's Kentucky in the hills, and he used to live. He used to go to the river and go play and go fishing. He used to go run up the hills, run around in the hills, and call the nature and climb trees and et cetera, et cetera. Basically, he's like, yeah, I used to live here. This is my child home. Like, it was beautiful. We loved it here. And he's like, oh, yeah, I went to join the army because, there's not really anything else to do after I got out of high school. So I said, I just went to go to the army. And he came back, and literally, there's just, the river is fucking black. The trees and the plants and all the foliage is dead. There's dead fish constantly in the water, and there's just coal like it just leaked into the water supply, and it's killed everything. And it's like he literally said, my childhood is dead because of this. I have no memory of it. I cannot experience my home anymore. It's gone. And that's fucking sad. And I was like, oh God. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
and the idealist inside me is like, home is what you remember it being, not what it is now. That's always my idealist, optimism. But like at the same time, it's like, well, it's still fucking sad to see it happen,
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've kind of, and obviously this isn't only, well, maybe it is kind of uniquely Appalachian in a way of, I feel like a lot of, even in the context of the coal mining industry, where these people, these coal miners, feel very connected to the land because like it is the land giving them their living, even if it is filtered through this experience of having to coal mine and the company pays you, versus maybe a more traditional way of living where like he's getting at with the fishing, and like that is how you put food on the table. You go and get it, and the land provides in that way. So in both experiences, the land is providing. And I think that's an experience that a lot of, maybe people from big cities who even, and I'm not like dogging them, like
y'all damn city slickers.
Yeah, no, like I'm not dogging them because like all I'm saying is even people who are maybe from a big city who want to protect the environment, they maybe don't understand how connected we are. Like we are animals living in the environment. We're not separate from it. Like even in these big cities, that's that's our home. You know what I mean?
And we only get one Earth, man. Like it sounds cliche, but we get one, and that's it. And it's a beautiful place.
So. And to see that, like, have that life where you were very connected to this place and this land, and then to come and see it just absolutely destroyed for, like we were saying, that simple need. I mean, for greed. That's all it is for greed.
It's explicitly greed, yeah.
And, to see that destroyed because of a, just the, the sin of others, essentially, it's just heartbreaking,
It sure is, and it's a really nice choice of sample in this song, and again we kind of get that kind of build up to almost catharsis of stress and anger in the final part of the song, and again I have the same feedback here, where it gets very loud, but it gets very angry, and forgive me if I'm wrong on this, but on this one we have another sample at the end. Where he comes out of that long sample about nature, and he starts to do the scream part again, where he's saying, blackened water, sand and soot grinding gears halt the serenity, and then it has another sample, and it starts building and like layering samples in these very dissonant sounds, and it sounds very like almost like chaotic, that we've just kind of like it's just like, again, it sounds very upset, very angry. I can't, again, sonically, not for me, but I understand the emotion that was going for, where it was like, we should be mad about this. And yeah, rightfully so. We should try to protect our environment, of course, and animals, of course, and plants. It's just, it's one of those things, like, it ends the song on that kind of stress again. And then it kind of does a cut at the end. So, Yeah, and then it gives another sample right after that. And it says, this is guy talking again, and he said, why are we, and the way we're doing the coal mining isn't the way we need to go. This is wrong. In fact, why don't we use the money we use for the mines and find a better way to mine it? Because this is not the sustainable source of energy we think it is. Like, why did we not look into developing something different? Because it could probably be better for everybody, and the environment included. He's like, just saying, we have opportunities. And then the song ends there. So really,
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I mean, it's just so frustrating, these people who, and like, I understand a lot of it. These, especially these people from coal mining communities where they're like, this is all we have. If the mines leave, we are destitute. We can't stay here. So like, I do think there's a real responsibility as we transition from, coal and these fossil fuels, or as we hopefully transition,
Yeah.
to like make sure that these communities aren't left behind. Like because these coal companies have purposefully made it so that they're the only game in town. So we need to make sure that these communities aren't left behind, that other industries can be brought in that are not so destructive. And
Yeah, sure.
all I'm getting at is, like, I understand that impulse to be like, no, 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 we have to support coal mining, when I that's just
It's not
shouldn't.
that it's not that you don't support the miners. It's that you want to take care of the earth,
Yeah,
and and those things are mutually exclusive when it comes to coal mining, right? So
yeah.
it's like you can't have it both ways. You got to make a decision, and I'm always going to side on, well, we can find a different source. There must be
Yeah,
another way. There has to be another way with the technology we have, and I think we're heading that direction. And I think it's good.
and I
Because
think,
it's you see people, not only people but animals too, who are hurt by it, and it's sad.
yeah, and I think what I'm trying to get at is, like, it doesn't have to be this zero sum game where, like, the
Yeah,
only option for the area has to be coal. And I get that the will is not there because the value has been extracted from Appalachia. So why do any of these outside groups or power structures or anything, why would they care? Essentially, they're like, we got what we needed. Why do we care about these poor folks? So all I'm getting at is, like, that is, to me, the core of the issue is other industries need to be brought in so that coal can die. You know what I mean? Because it is just such a destructive thing.
oh yeah, and you have to be smart about it. You can't just flip the switch overnight. You
Yeah.
can't just, yeah, exactly. There's a way to do things right, for sure.
Yeah, so I
Um,
think that that's so great to include that
yeah,
little clip where he's like, "Why wasn't this money used to find another way? Even if it is coal mining, why didn't we find another less destructive way? Why did we do it this way?"
right. And that really is a great piggyback point. If you're good with this song, I think it's a great segue into the Blackwater song.
Yeah, I think this is such an interesting one. It's weird.
Okay, yeah. So that's definitely my opinion as well. Not bad, weird. Not it's so the whole song, this whole song, Black Waters. You said this is a cover, correct?
Yeah, so this is another very kind of traditional Appalachian folk song. This one was written by Jean Ritchie, who I don't know as much about, but just from my little bit of research, she is a she learned, like, just an ungodly amount of folk songs that were Appalachian songs that came from all these different places and then were gathered here, and she also wrote, and this is one of her songs, which is a clearly just from a very painful place where she looks out her window and what was once beautiful, it's black rivers where nothing can live.
Yeah, and again, really echoing the sentiment from the last song, where you know, very clear allegory for how the pollution from the mining has destroyed everything once again. The whole song is kind of done in this airy, very ethereal, like it's really weird. It's definitely like more traditional folk. It's not metal. Well, I mean, it's this whole album is metal, but it's not like the black metal song, and it's it's just this really weird vibe, this really weird like aesthetic where it's like wispy and airy and light and kind of, it's like his voice is very like muffled almost and like almost kind of like metally sounding,
Yeah,
and it's
like
intentional.
yeah, it's very drawn back, and there's a lot of reverb
Yes.
on it.
Yes, yeah, a lot of reverb. That's the word I'm looking for. Tons of reverb on it, and it's like he's just kind of very like lightly singing this light melody. He's not giving it much power, but it's just some chill instrumental with that over it. That's pretty much the whole song. It's just not really much dynamically going on, which isn't a problem per se, but it's kind of more so like a almost like a poetry form than it was like a proper like 4/4 like song. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
again, some really nice lyrics in here about like, you know, like you said, the black water is running through the land. That's kind of the refrain is like, there's destruction on every hand and black water is running through the land. That's the main like motif there. Talks about how, you know, there's, you know, wildflowers and, you know, green valleys and, you know, birds and beautiful things that they see every day and they get, you know, destroyed. So sadly, their lives are changed by this industry, and then it goes on again where it's it says, in the coming of springtime we planted our corn, and the end of springtime we buried our son. And I'm like, ah, fucking gee. And then it says, well, then that later that summer a man says everything's okay, we just need to find another way to get into the mine. And then they tore the mountain down and it covered the corn and his son's grave. So it's like, well, fuck you twice. It's like, oh god, like
yeah,
it's like fuck you and fuck you again. Oh, by the way, you can't even have your grave. Fuck off. It's like, ah, and it's like,
yeah,
and yeah, it's just fucking this terrible byproduct of industry, and that's true of a lot of industries, mind you, not one in particular even, but it's just so sad that this kind of stuff happens, and like you said, there must be a better way. The song kind of goes through and says like, man, if I could fucking do anything, I would take my money, I would buy the shit out of this entire county, and I would tell all of them, and I would just go fishing. I would fuck them. I would tell them to get the hell out. No more industry. I'm just gonna go sit on the riverbank and fish by myself and let nature be, and let my life be, because I just want my life. And that's really, I mean, we all feel that way about things. We all wish we could just go buy a country and just do whatever the fuck we wanted in it. And it's like, sure, it's a pipe dream, but it's like at the same time, it's like, it's also a huge middle finger when it's like, but like the environment too. It's like you can't even leave that be. And that's sad.
yeah. And I mean, this obviously isn't as explicit as the, you know, where they're like sink the capitalist system into the darkest depths of hell, but it's
Yes,
still
yes.
a pretty radical song where it's just like, we need to fuck all this. Like, we don't need any of this shit. Let's just, you know,
It,
the land can, you know, give us what we need. We don't have to fucking
yeah.
destroy it. Like,
Reframe how you think of what wants and needs are.
yeah,
And that can really drive a lot of decisions on a macro and a micro level. I think a lot of people, especially in today's society, where there's so much societal pressure to do things a certain, and you see that a lot here in the States, where it's like, oh, you know, oh, living with your parents, that's stupid. It's like, no, it's so you're saving money. Why is that stupid? Like, no. And it's like so many other cultures, it's not. And you need to reframe yourself to think, no, it's actually the smartest thing you could fucking do. You know?
yeah,
So it's in, and of course, personal preferences, and no, everyone's different. I get that, but that's an example. Point is, it's like you can find different ways to do things if you just think about it logistically and take a step back from what you've been taught. You know, and if you just accept something as the norm, it's like, oh, it's the norm. It's like, well, you can change it. Doesn't mean it has to be a hostile takeover to make a change. You can just start thinking differently. You know?
yeah. And I did just want to read some of these lyrics because I just think that they're really pretty and really good and just really evocative and
Sure.
really makes you feel a certain way. Well, the quail, she is a pretty bird. She sings a sweet tongue. In the roots of the tall timbers, she nests with her young. Then the hillside explodes with a dynamite's roar, and the voice of the small bird will sound there no more. And it's like, God damn.
Motherfucker, you know I'm a bird dad. Why did you show me this shit? It's like the second time this has happened, isn't it?
Okay, the first time was much worse than this. I legitimately
No,
had
yeah.
forgotten about that, and when I read it, I was like, oh God.
No, yeah, that makes me sad. And it's terrible. It's so sad. But we need to be mindful. It's just be mindful. Think about it, you know?
Yeah, and I think part of why I like, Harlan County, USA and this so much and why I wanted to talk about them is they really challenge these popular narratives about what Appalachians are and what they can be, where it's like, people are like, oh, it's Trump country and da 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 and all this stuff. And it's like, here's this guy who is making really interesting art. He's an anarchist and he's like, we need to protect this land. Like, that is our job.
And who could argue with him? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, yeah, fuck it. Like, I agree with everything about that. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's interesting that it definitely, like you said, the stereotype, the norm has never historically been positive, which is silly. And I think it's a nice way to show that people can have strength and ingenuity no matter where they are, and no matter what public perception is. It doesn't matter. People will always find a way to be smart.
Yeah. And another, thing I think this album does really well with the covers and the originals and kind of this juxtaposition between black metal and bluegrass is it shows there is a through line. Like, this isn't just some weird guy who is, out on the fringes making shit up. It's like, no, there have always been people
Yeah.
who have felt this way, and it those stereotypes are not true. Like, there are obviously multitudes of people, and no group is a monolith or whatever, but still it shows that, like, there have always been these people that had these radical ideas that felt like these things were the best way forward for themselves and their neighbors.
Yeah, and like I said before, it's like just because you have a different idea doesn't mean that either you or anybody else needs to just like say, "Oh, well, I don't like the walls being painted blue. Let's paint them green." It's like, okay, well, yeah, but can we talk about like why you want to paint them green? How are you going to paint them green? Like, there's logistics, there's steps, and there's the right way of doing things. And for sure, I think this at least I think it's important at the baseline to prompt people and say, try to think differently, try to look outside of that norm of what you think you need to be doing, and ask, do I? And as long as you're not hurting anybody else, make that decision for yourself. That's all that matters. So yeah, I really like the message here. Sonically, not my favorite song, frankly. But the message is fantastic. Obviously, but I think he did an interesting take on it. Granted, I don't know the original, but I think the song was interesting, made me think, which I think is the whole point of it. So
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that leads us into the title track, Kentucky.
yeah. Yeah, Kentucky. So again, this whole structure of this album, it's bookends. So right, so you have the first track, instrumental. Then you have heavy metal song. Then a traditional song. Then a heavy metal song. Traditional song. And then I got lost track. The point is, it alternates.
Yeah.
It alternates. And Black Waters is a traditional song, and then it ends and a book ends it and says, "All right, here's a nice just instrumental to walk you on out." It's very chill, very nice. Really nice melody. It feels a little more somber than the first one, for sure. And maybe that's just because of the subject matter and the way I listen to it. But yeah, it kind of just is a nice 2 or 3 minute little jig. And it's good. It's well done from my perspective, the bluegrass at least. And yeah, it just ends the album, and that finishes it off. So
Yeah, and I really like how this album ends. It's a great song, but also it's like the piano just kind of like starts to fail, and
yeah,
everything just kind of like ends on this note of like, it just feels very complete. You know what I mean? It makes you feel
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay, like that was a very nice ending. It's done. It's like a good dessert. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
the meal is over.
you resolve the melody, you resolve the album, right? So it's
Yeah,
just kind
yeah.
of like it's like when you finish a painting, you sign it, you just go do 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 perfect, and you put that last little dot on the I, and then you step back and go, I'm done. All right, and it's nice. So yeah, man. Overall, I really so what I think that worked really well on this album. I really liked the instrumentals, great guitar, really interesting choice of instruments as far as like going with the banjo, going with the guitar, and kind of mixing those. I thought that was really interesting. Lyrics, fantastic lyrics. Okay, the only real disses I can even give it are I just don't vibe with a lot of the screaming. Not for me in a lot of ways in some parts.
Yeah.
Do I think it's bad? No. Do I would I enjoy listening to it like at as of now, enjoy listening to it like on a day by day basis for fun? It probably not as much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think this is something that if I'm in a mood, I could get with. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, and I'm not even saying that you're gonna like come to appreciate it, but I do think, especially black metal, is such an acquired taste that you kind of have to dislike it for a while until
Sure.
something that's how it was with me anyway, until like one day something clicked. And now like I said, I just think it's one of the most interesting spaces for art to me. And what I'm getting at is like you might never like it, and that's okay, because you know there are those metalheads who are like, oh, how do people don't like metal? It's because they're dumb, and it's metal is so good because the instrumentation is so amazing, and da da da. And it's like, dog, this guy just yelled at us for an hour. Like, I get why
Yeah.
people don't like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
No.
not.
And
It's not Kenny G. You know what I mean?
I want to hear Kenny G black metal album now. No, but I I will note like the more as I listen to the other two black metal songs on this album, I definitely found myself maybe because I was just prepared for it being a little different than what I'm used to. I found myself kind of paying a little bit more less attention to like what I'm used to and like the lyrics and the vibe and the aesthetic of like you said. So it's like I was kind of like starting to get a little bit more what it was about as I came through because my first reaction to the first Black and Mouth song, I was like, whoa, this is I don't know about this, had those parts where I was like I could jam with this part, but I don't know about the rest of it. So I already kind of caught myself looking kind of listening a little bit more in other aspects than I was kind of used to. So maybe that is that learning process you're talking about. But overall, like I said, I don't think it's bad. I just think it's something that I don't have the ability or the ear for really at this point in time. Like I said, I may never, and that's fine. I don't think it's bad art because clearly the message is fantastic. The instrumentals are fantastic. It's just personal preference how things roll. So
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and
And
I think I think it's important to and that's the thing. That's okay. I think to anybody who's a huge fan of this, aside from Matt, because Matt knows this. I'm not shitting on it. I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm not saying the album or black metal is terrible. I'm just saying like I've definitely am not in the receptive category historically for that, and it may not go that route. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I definitely do want to thank you for coming at this with an open mind because it is so easy for people to hear, like the screaming or, just like these, just like that super fast, trebly guitar or whatever, and just be like, oh no, this sucks. You know what I mean? Like
Oh
this
yeah,
is
no,
this is weird and I don't like it. And once again,
yeah,
not for everybody, and that's fine. But I appreciate you coming at it and being like, yeah, let's give it a chance.
yeah. I could say the same shit about what I've showed you so far on this show, but that's literally the whole point of this show is to say like, all right, you ever listen to ska punk? No, fuck you, listen to ska punk. You ever listen to black metal? Fuck you, you listen to black metal. You listen to Dio? Fuck you, you listen to Dio. I'm like, oh shit, okay. And that's kind of the point, right? Is this dialogue supposed to help us broaden our perspectives and kind of think outside the box and kind of enrich our enrich our experience a little bit more, even if it doesn't mean everything we see is perfect. So,
Yeah.
um,
And one thing I did want to ask is, so from your preconceived notion of what black metal was versus the end of this album, did anything change? Did you have a good idea of what black metal might be like, or did you have any notions at all to begin with?
okay, so this did not meet what I thought black metal was at all. I thought black metal was really going to be more so like super heavy, like chugging and like slamming and like really more of a thrash sound, I guess. Technically, is what I would get at. But it's like just like really heavy, like guitars and like stuff like that, and just like double bass drums going really fast. But I was not expecting this. Like I said, very light, very interesting production decisions and interesting instrumentals, like structure. None of this was what I was thinking. I was expecting to hear pretty much like heavy screaming nonstop. Was my kind of blind input going into it. So that's an interesting question you asked that. But yeah, I definitely was not expecting this.
Yeah, and this obviously isn't like a typical black metal album, but I think that's what's so cool about black metal is it really is just like there's a lot of shit that is really weird, and it's just black metal.
Sure. Well, yeah. Again, thank you for sharing it and giving the history of it. I think it definitely helps me get a better rounded understanding of this album as well. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's it from my side. Is there anything else you want to comment on Kentucky Kentucky by Panopticon?
Not really. I'm just really excited for you to get to the point that you can hear 30 seconds of a song and be like, "Oh yeah, this is Funeral Doom actually."
Funeral Doom. What the absolute fuck?
It's a genre, man. we're gonna get you there.
Oh God. Alrighty. Cool. Well, again, thank you, man. So I guess without further ado, I guess it's time for me to tell you what you're watching this week.
Yeah, so I'm watching something.
Oh yes. Okay, cool. So actually, since you did a part two, I figured I'd do a part two as well. I mean, honestly, it's gonna be pretty straightforward, pretty simple. So you watched last time you watched 5 episodes of Mononoke, correct?
Yes.
How do you feel about finishing the other 7?
Man, I'm pretty happy with that. I
Really?
enjoyed. Yeah, I was telling my mom about it, and I was like, yeah. And this is another thing. I kind of had preconceived notions about anime, but I was like, yeah. So the elevator pitch of it is this guy who basically like fights and kills demons. So I thought it was going to be one way. But it's basically just like the demons are these aspects of people. So it's just this weird roundabout way of doing character studies. And I'm into that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So you'd be cool with watching another 7 episodes of that?
Oh, yeah, man. I'm going to learn the fucking form and reason and whatever else it was.
What was it? Truth, reason, and shape, right?
Yeah. I'm going to learn your truth, reason, and shape. And then I'm going to kill your emotions.
Well, you know what, Matt? Fuck you, we ain't doing that. Instead, we do have a part 2 for you. You're going to be watching Princess Mononoke this week, motherfucker.
Is that real? Like, is that what which one am I doing?
Yeah, Princess Mononoke.
Oh, okay. Is that in any way related to Mononoke? Like,
in aspect of technical verbiage and vocabulary, yes, but no, it is. So Princess Mononoke is a Studio Ghibli film from 1997, directed by Hayao Miyazaki. And basically, it's about a young man named Ashitaka who must come into this kind of ongoing interaction between the god of a forest and the people and humans who surround it. And so, again, that is called Princess Mononoke.
This sounds like an interpretation of Kentucky by Panopticon.
What do you mean by that?
The protection of the natural environment and being, the relationship of that humanity.
Hey, you know what? We'll just say I planned this. But I had the foresight to link Princess Mononoke to Panopticon. But in any case, no. Yeah. So we will talk off the microphone how you're going to watch that. I think it's on some streaming services. We'll touch base on that here. But yes, no, Princess Mononoke. This will be your first Ghibli film, won't it?
Yeah, and like I kind of have an idea of what Studio Ghibli is and all that stuff. And when I was telling people about the Mononoke episode, I was like, "Yeah, it's this anime that I'm watching for the show." And they were like, "Oh, Princess Mononoke. That's a Studio Ghibli thing." And I was like, "No, this is something else." And they were like, everybody was like, "What are you talking about?" So I'm assuming that this is a lot more famous than Mononoke.
Oh,
And
100%.
I have heard people say that this is like the Disney of Japan, which I don't know exactly what they're getting at with that, but I know that
Um,
it's pretty big, right? Like people are really into Studio Ghibli.
so they have a lot of films that are very popular. You've got Howl's Moving Castle. You've got Spirited Away. If you've ever seen any kind of merch from those two films, people fucking love those to death. But they have a very long, very long history of just really, honestly, some of my favorite movies. Really cool stuff, really cool animation, really interesting concepts, some of which are based in Japanese folklore, i.e., Princess Mononoke, some and Spirited Away. You've got a lot of stuff there that's really based in myths and folk tales and stuff like that, and creatures from other worlds, etc., etc. But they're always really done in this kind of wholesome, lighthearted, colorful, it's just really interesting way with very fluid animation, very hyper specific style of animation. If you see a Ghibli film, you'll probably see aspects of that film in other film, but you'll be able to tell after seeing two or three of these films what the fuck it is, and like say, oh, I know that's probably done by them. It's animated by them because the way the hair looks, literally, you'll know right away. And so it's, I mean, you've got so much you have some of the most super fans out there for this, as I'm sure you know. It is fucking everywhere. People love it. There's tons out there that I would say are very good movies, but we'll start you off with probably, I'm gonna say it's my favorite of the Ghibli movies, and people might fucking fight me on that. But Princess Mononoke. So I think it's gonna be a fun one for you. I would say this is by far one of the more adult ones, in my opinion. A few of them you could say are very kid friendly in the sense where it's like, you know, very not. Yeah, I won't say anything else, but you can go watch it here and tell me your opinions for next week, and then I do promise we will go watch the rest of Mononoke as well, because man, that's just a fucking trip too. But yeah, Studio Ghibli, Princess Mononoke for next week. You have any questions on that?
Is this the one with that big chinchilla?
Oh no, I don't even know what the fuck Totoro is. You're thinking of My Neighbor Totoro,
Oh, okay.
the big gray guy with the bunny ears.
Yeah, I've just seen that big
Oh
chinchilla.
yeah. Oh, chinchilla is an apt a description for him. Actually, I think he's literally just called a Totoro. But I think chinchilla works just as fucking well.
Tiberi, I don't know much, but I know a chinchilla when I see one, and that's a chinchilla the size of a polar bear.
God damn it. No, but we'll get to Totoro eventually too. But yeah, I want to hear your opinion on this because obviously it's still anime. This is technically a second anime thing. It is definitely not your typical like My Hero Academia or Naruto, or it's much more of like a narrative, you know. So it I want to hear your opinions, not only because people who listen to this are fucking rabid for Studio Ghibli, but also I just want to hear your personal opinions based on what you've seen from Mononoke, and maybe see now if you're when I say Mononoke, the TV show Mononoke, and see if maybe your anticipations of anime line up more with this, or you still kind of feel differently, or what. So
Okay, yeah, that sounds fun. I look forward to it.
alrighty then. Well, anything else then before we sign off for the evening?
No. I thank you for listening to the album and for what I'm going to be watching this week. And I thank anyone who's listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, ideas, if you want to just call us stupid, funny, silly, shitty names, you can email us at bestfriendsdissimilarinterests@gmail.com.
I'm still waiting for somebody to use that email for like their Domino's delivery or something.
Don't give people fucking ideas. I don't want any fucking crazy shit sent to us. Fuck that. Don't send us crazy shit. I'll say that right now.
I mean, a Domino's delivery isn't so crazy. I'm fine with that.
Well, I ain't paying for it. Fuck that.
Oh no, but you know.
Anyway, I think we're rattling on. All right, guys. Thank you all for watching. And be safe. Be nice to yourselves, the environment. And we'll talk to y'all next week.
Good night. Bye.
Peace.